For today's episode of Guest Practices, I welcome Kevin Cottam. Kevin has had a long and distinguished career, and going back to the 1980s, he was even a champion figure skater. In fact, in 1988, Kevin was head choreographer for the closing ceremony of the Calgary Winter Olympic Games. Truly impressive. Since then, he's become a trainer, coach, and well-known speaker in organisations globally. Kevin's also the author of the best-selling book The Nomadic Mindset, Never Settle Too Long. Kevin visited tribes all around the world to understand how their nomadic cultures and ways of life could inform organisations and business leadership today. Our conversation goes back into Kevin's journey, what he discovered, and what business leaders everywhere can do to cultivate a nomadic mindset to take their organisations into a more uncertain future. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Guest Practices. I'm so happy to welcome Kevin Cottam. Hi Kevin, thanks for joining me.
Hi Jeremy, my best friend. You are the man.
Well, thank you very much for saying so. And it's, you're quite a hard man to get hold of. You are a global nomad after all, and you are the author of The Nomadic Mindset, Never Settle Too Long, which we're going to talk about today. You're also a speaker, a coach, a trainer, a choreographer, and a skater, which not many people will know about. So before we get into that business, I've got a key question for you. Cast your mind back to 1988, winter 1988. What were you doing and how did it go?
Well, 88 was an amazing year. And of course, spiritually, Chinese-wise, the number of 288, 2 8s in a row is pretty phenomenal. So I was directing and choreographing the closing ceremonies for the 1988 Calgary Olympic Games, which was a phenomenal experience. And it was a 9-month lead up to that. And it was an incredible learning experience. But I mean, what can you do with that? I mean, you have a 2 billion TV audience, you have a 60,000 live, and in twinkle lights in the closing ceremonies at night, and so much fun, and it was just a beautiful time, and certainly a lot of work. I mean, we didn't have computers really in those days, and I remember we were talking about it yesterday, is that we had this wonderful huge mobile phone that was just like this massive wedge, and you had to hold it up like this to your hand, but it was never really any good, so you just shouted and talked to people and used the dial-up. But I mean, it was a great experience, that. But 88 was not just that. It was about also, what do you do after an event like that? I mean, you've reached the top of your game. What do? Do you keep doing it? Well, it's difficult to do. But the other great thing is that I was involved as a choreographer for the Olympic champions in Seoul for synchronized swimming, so for Canada. So that was also an incredible time. And so that wasn't skating, but it was synchronized swimming. And later on in that year, also, I was involved with choreography for Kurt Browning in his first world championship in figure skating. So it was a pretty powerful year, I have to say.
When I first heard that story about you, I mean, my jaw was on the floor. I mean, I couldn't believe it. And you were a skater yourself, let's not forget as well. And then choreographing something like that, having seen the Olympics in more recent times as well. It's just, I can't imagine the job. But then you did find a way forward and a path forward. You found the business you have evolved through that. You've been working all around the world. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit more about the business you, and particularly now your journey, the more recent journey to uncover the nomadic mindset.
Well, you got a long story there. I don't know how long you have on the show. But the business me. Well, the business me, what does that mean? It is also very interesting. It seems to be the creative part of me, which is constantly in the throes of content, as we were just talking about. And I'm from the Olympics, I went on to do direct and choreograph very large multi-million-dollar touring figure skating shows, and also doing award-winning TV specials, of which they were part business. But the point is that they were about creating new shows with older companies, actually, that really had a very stuck mindset into the old way of doing things. Like Holiday on Ice, for example, I came in at a time when they were transitioning from an old ownership of 50 years to a new ownership. And then they were also in the process of holding on to it, but at the same time, do we sell it again? And but it was old thinking. It was such old thinking, past thinking that you ram down people's minds, that you abuse them, that you had them up very late hours training and rehearsing until opening night and telling them off and telling them that they were horrible and so disconnected. And I thought, how do you deal with that? You've got to pull people together. So I think I think that was one of the pieces that brought me to not only coaching, executive coaching, but also keynote speaking, was the fact that we must be able to bring people together. We must be able to have the harmonious circle, of which is very much gives the power to organizations to move forward and to create and to innovate and to form new territories. And which, at times, when you do that, is you go through, loops and twirls and up and down, and some things are successful, some things are not. But the business part of it was recently, which came in the last 3 years, was finding the nomadic mindset. So I realized that my brand was actually as a global nomad. After all these years, I found the brand, and, and I felt like a century-old person trying to figure out what is it that I do. So, but anyway, it gave life to an old way of thinking at the same time. Or was it just simply a way of thinking that I had not realized what it was called? So I have moved on an awful lot in different parts of my life, but there was always something that moved from one project, from one idea, from one city to whatever. There was always something in my gut that said, move on. And at the end of 2016, there was a real gut feeling that I had to move on. I didn't have a purpose really anymore, and I didn't really have a direction. I was speaking, but what was I speaking about? It could be anything. And I wasn't doing what I loved. So anyway, I found a mentor, a speaker by the name of Frederick Heron, a Swedish fellow, and we sat down for an hour to do an inner theme session. And he said, I'm curious what you mean by a global nomad. He says, I want to know what nomad means. And I went, oh. So he looked it up in the dictionary and stuff. And so we started to talk about it, and he coached me through it. And then he said, well, if you're going to speak on such a topic, then you need to research it, and you got to write a book. I went, oh, okay. He said, what would be the name of the book? And I said, I didn't think for more than a nanosecond, I think. And I said, this is Nomadic Mindset, of course. And he went, whoa, what is that? And I said, well, it's a mindset being a nomad. It's not just going and traveling. It's a mindset that's within you. And so he said, okay, now you need to go and research. And I went, oh my God, research. What is he going to say now? So he says, you have to research, and you have to have conversations with at least 100 executives. And because it's a leadership book, you need to go and spend time with nomadic cultures. And I went, oh, can I not do it on Google or sit in the library? And he said, no, you have to go. I said, why? And he said, because you need stories. You need to be on the ground with them. You need to eat with them. You need to learn stories. You need to sit around the campfire. You need to sit in their yurts. You need to sit in their little cabins. You need to sit there and you enjoy. And you have to walk the land, and you've got to learn all these things. And I went, oh. So it was about walking the territory. It was about really learning about people. It was about examining what is the inner parts of their wisdom. It changed my life.
It sounds absolutely amazing. And of course, I've seen a lot of the photos of your travels.
Yeah.
And the last thing that you said there is really quite interesting, because we talk about it in business a lot, don't we? We talk about talking the talk and walking the walk. And your walking the land gives you that great sense of the magnitude of what some of these peoples have been through, their cultures, how they work, how their minds operate, how the society forms around them, and then, how their outlook of the land around them and so on. And having heard some of your stories, I wanted to ask you, actually, following some of those travels that with all the nomadic tribes around the world, because it wasn't just one, of course, that you with, and in writing your book, because there's so much, of course, that comes out of it. But what are the most striking learnings for you that came out of it, which, when you then put your business hat on, thought these are massive learnings for leaders in organizations today in this age of disruption that we're in, this uncertain
Absolutely.
VUCA world, all of those things, so that they can uncover their own nomadic mindset?
Well, that's a big question, because there's, my head starts to go around and like, where do I start with this, right? And this answer. And I would say that first of all, the thesis of the book is really that I believe that we've become too narrow and we must expand. So one of the quotes from a young millennial Mongolian student that I met in Ulaanbaatar, we were chatting, and I could sense that she was really longing for the Mongolian steppes and the beautiful golden rolling dunes of the Gobi Desert. And she says, this is where freedom is. This is where agility is. This is where you need to adapt, and you need to be very used to the change, and the environment is constantly shifting. And she said to me at some point, she said, nomads think vastly, act narrowly. So what does that mean? So this is really about expansion. She said, first of all, they go wide instead of narrow. And then they look at all the possibilities, all the threats, all the risks, all of the different communities, all of the conversations. They look at all of the possibilities, which are the puzzle, and then they rapidly focus in and move. And so people say, well, nomads are always moving. That's absolutely incorrect. Most of the nomads today are settlers. They're stationary. Why? Because of governments, etc. But most of the important thing is, I think, is that, so when I went to Mongolia, then I also went to Kenya with the Maasai, and then I finished up on the first set of research was in the southern Sahara of Morocco. And so I'm sitting in the Rocky Sahara. This is one little house, really, with 2 rooms and nothing else around it. And we drive up, and so my guide and my photographer and my driver, they all greet this guy because they speak Arabic. And so the point is that they invite you in, because it's their duty to invite you in. So think of that as an organizational importance, is that they invite you in. You invite you in, they give you gifts, you give gifts, and so then you start the conversation. I sat there and I listened to all this conversation back and forth while the tea was being made, 3 cups of tea, and the master tea maker. And at some point, my translator said, you can now ask your questions. And I had, well, why now do I get to ask questions? Anyway, I sat there and I asked questions, first world questions, right? Oh, yeah. How do you deal with change? How do you build trust? What is the leadership like? All these first world questions, and often they would kind of look at me like, first of all, with change, they would say to me, I don't know why you are thinking about it, because everything's always changing, so why do you need to think about it? And so also then when they said, I said, how do you build trust? And they would look at me, well, it's very simple. What you say is what you do. You walk your talk, and you don't divert from it. You're consistent. And they just look at you, and that's it. So they bring it down to the simplicity in life, right? And so my guy, my master tea maker, he asked me, which I hadn't had before, which was quite amazing. He said, what makes us all similar? Because he'd found out I'd been to Mongolia and to Kenya, and he says, what makes us all similar? And I had to think for a second. And what came out of my gut was humanity. Is that on the base of all levels, that they were all similar, whether they came from different geographical parts of the world, different religions, different languages, different food sources. Everything is different in that sense. but the underlying humanity of the trust and the values and the behaviors were very, very similar. And so I think that that takes us back to us, is that that is what is similar, but we've lost it.
Yeah,
And in organizations, sorry.
sorry, I thought you could
No,
carry
no,
on,
no.
Kevin.
No, and I'm just saying that in organizations and in humanity today that we've lost all of this, the ability to think simply.
Well, it is interesting. You know that I've just done a piece of research on emerging leadership traits coming post-pandemic, post-2020 transformation, all of these kind of things. And that last thing that you said around humanity is coming out as the most needed trait, human-centered leadership. It sounds like you know, the nomadic mindset is very much of now for the organization. And some of the things, the words that you use, all of these things really resonate. Walk the land a little bit. And I do say this to leaders sometimes, that whose eyes can often be on the sky. You've got to have your feet on the ground as well to really understand what's going on. And this year, no other year is that so true. Because
Absolutely.
if we're up here, it's probably too narrow, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Most people go to the narrow spot first of all, and then they have a hard time to get out and wide. What we end up doing as coaches, people come to us in this constricted place or blocked or locked or, stressed, and it's very narrow. And you can't see all the possibilities. And so we have to ask them to go wide to see the possibilities before they make a solution and a decision. But I think also, I totally agree with what you're saying, Jeremy, because what is being asked today are all of what are the traits of nomads. And they have taught us since the beginning, thousands and thousands of years, that agility is extremely important, flexibility, adaptability, environment, and they are the most interconnected beings of all. And when I talk about organizations and I hear about digital transformation and all sorts of things, and people say to me, even though engineers are not interconnected, there's no interconnection, people are not talking to each other, this is wrong. So one of the things that I think is actually very important with organizations, if they start to look at their organization as a territory and as a big land mass, and then it's chunked down into different areas and there's rivers that go through it, and just look at it as a territory, I think this can help you to know that you've got an innovation territory, you've got marketing, you've got all of these in different areas of departments, but what is bringing them all together? What is interconnecting them? Because you have to have this language that's interconnecting them. All territories, if you look at a map and in a country, everything is interconnected. If you look at your inner body, everything is interconnected. So why do we constantly separate? And so I think that's one of the biggest problems, and that's what we need to do in the future. Well, I love what you talk about walking the territory, and that's what I would suggest is a way forward for organizations when they start to go back into their companies, if they're not already, is for leaders to be able to get out of their office, get out of where they are. Go and take your computer and wander, go nomading, I call it, your company, and sit there, observe, listen, watch. You'll learn more than sitting in your office about your company because you're interacting. Go wandering, go nomading, is what I call it. Get there as you say, get your feet on the ground. And you'll start to build respect and trust this way because you are not separate, you are with.
Well, there are so many things here that you've kind of brought into it, which resonate so strongly in today's workplace, and not just workplace, of course, in life. Our own journey, of course, it's a human endeavor at the heart of all this, isn't it, Kevin? But and again, from a business perspective, some of these things that you've talked about, and particularly maybe some of those leaders that that you've worked with, for those of them that are buying into this and getting it right, what are some of the benefits that they're realizing, whether it be a small, large business, multinational, local business? traditional business or kind of new breed? What are they getting out of it that's really tangible in terms of the benefits of a nomadic mindset?
So I think the tangible pieces of the nomadic mindset is understanding, first of all, the awareness that you have three mindsets that are running around in your organization at all times. And that in my book I talk about it is not only the nomadic mindset, which is the bias, but you have a builder mindset and you have a settler mindset. These three, I think that you can already start to identify what are the typologies, what are the behaviors, what are the traits that identify them. This is a very, very important piece, I believe, because we don't bring people into the company on the level of mindset. We bring them into skill, which is great, it's important, don't get me wrong. But everyone can have the same skills, but not the same mindset to drive those skills. So understanding, the three types of these mindsets is very important. So in my research and what the polls that I've done is understanding that the majority of people that are in business are builders, and then usually settlers, and then maybe nomads. And when I ask this question of the dominance, what is the mindset that you need more of today when you move forward? And they all say we need more nomads. But they don't know what to do about that particular realm, because nomads are like this entity of what does that mean? And so that's the first awareness, which is helping people, is understanding the mindsets that live within the organization, but also understanding what is the mindset of the organization, the culture. If it is a builder, it's going to stay builder, and it's going to promote builder because it attracts like. You cannot have just like in your organization to thrive. You need all three. You cannot hire into, a lot of time in HR, they'll hire because they like the person and they get along with them. Not to say that that's a bad thing. That's certainly a great thing. However, it's usually because they're connecting with their mindset and their values. That's not always what you need for a certain position, right? I mean, you sometimes need a nomad that's going to go, this is a great idea, this is a great opportunity, let's move in that direction. How are we going to do it? Let's have some autonomy. Let's allow us to get moving forward. We bring a community together, and that community we can drive. But we use that community as a source. It's not just a linear way. It's circular. And so the source of the individuals that you have, the communication, the masterminds of the communications, and I believe that this is something that's very important for them. But they also need to understand the agility. Agility is not just in the brain. Agility is in the physicality, it's in the heart. So then we get to the heart, and we talk about that. Is that whole thing about, what's come through here is the caring, the humility, the vulnerability. All of these are the qualities, right, that you're talking about in leadership that you found. And that's humanity. You need to get on the ground. It's not something apart from. So it's about integrating these. How do you do it? It doesn't take a lot of courses to do this. It takes conversation. It takes recognition of people. It takes honoring what somebody has done. People don't. That's really what it is. I mean, when you look at nomadic cultures, they work as a culture. They work as a community. And we have gotten away from community. So, for example, let's bring this thought of community. If you were to draw your organogram, most people would draw it like this, right? In lines, and everything is a line, top down. What if you were to have the leader at the top, but then a circle that goes around from the leader back again? And then internally are all sorts of pies and interconnected pies, but nothing is straight. It is windy. So it's an idea of a thought, because this brings the community into a circle. One of the other things about is helping is how do we communicate? How do we bring things together? My suggestion is instead of having like today people are they're virtuified out, they are zoomified out and are working way over because there's no real limitation on how these meetings should be. Why not, instead of calling them meetings, which has an absolute negative aspect today, is what about calling them wisdom circles or masterminds and bringing all the minds together? And in that mastermind is what nomads do, is they bring everybody together, put all the information into the center, and then create what comes from it. So what about that? We need to reframe businesses. We need to reframe businesses that are expansive, that see the bigger territory, not just their small little world with walls around it. People have said we need to put up barriers. One of the worst things that you saw in Namibia is that there's such massive land masses and they all have a fence around them. Why? Ownership. Don't come on my land. This is mine. We need to tear down those borders between organizations and the different departments. Interconnect with them. So these are principles I believe that are very important. Is communication, circular communication, is understanding awareness of mindsets, understanding of the agility, that how you build trust, and again is through walking through your organization, is saying what you're going to say and do not deviate. Be also honest. People want some honesty. So I think that this all comes from nomadic life. But it also is representative of real life. It's an environment, right? So I'm sorry I went on too long.
Well, no, I want to jump in there and ask a question, because the obvious question for me is, are there any organizations, you don't have to name names, but you can if you want, but are there any organizations that are living and breathing this and realizing the benefits?
Sure, absolutely. I can think of two that I have been intricately involved with in some way, and also my observation of others, maybe two others, but I will be very quick with those. And that one is called Muaz, and it's a digital relocation company out of Singapore, and the leader there is Junzian Li. And he has a company which is very circular, it's very nomadic, they're able to move around in their space and so their environment, but they're also able to jump in to help each other on different parts of it, so they know the company in and out. They have their positions, but they're all integrated. And so all the parts are leading to the main vision. And even if they have slightly different vision, but it's a part of the vision. And Junzian said to me, he said, sometimes people come and they really don't work out. And he tells them, this may not be the working environment that you want. You have to take responsibility. You have to feed, you have to bring stuff to the table. It's not just answering questions and just following the rule. And he says, it's fine if that's what you want, but that's where we are here. Another fellow by the name of Tahero Nori and Tech Buddy is a sort of a Uber-style on-site, at-home tech support. And they're growing very well also, and so they've really flourished. But at the same time, he uses a very sort of nomadic principles in many ways of the way I see that he works with people, and also he has the organization, the way he is developing his territories. The other person that I think is actually a person that I think is a head of a government that's really doing an amazing job is Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand. And she has, I believe just from watching her and listening to her, that she has truly a nomadic mindset, in that the way she's dealt with the pandemic, the way that she dealt with the mosque massacre, massacre, the way that she has dealt with in other parties to be part of it, to be part of her cabinet. People would say, well, why? But she wants other voices of other parties because she feels that everybody's together. And then, of course, she's also developing and really enhancing the Maori influence as well. So this is about humanity. It's about people. It's about governing the people because of the people. Um, I I want to do a shout out in many ways to Unilever because I think Paul Pullman really put in some incredible place to about sustainability and communication, and also developing grassroots. And I think that they're continuing to do that, and I believe that they're very strong in that sense of they're a very strong builder, but they're also a strong. They have heart to them, which I think is really curious. I believe that if you went through segments of organizations, they're probably more nomadic in some areas than in others. So it's not like all compartments like communication, like leadership, digital transformation, creativity, innovation, uh, human resources, sales. They may all be different in the way they conduct themselves. But one of the most important things about nomadic cultures is they have a vision of where they are, who they are. And that is their North Star. Their culture is so important, but their culture is important to evolve. We're in a state today that evolution is important. I've been really thinking about these two words, transformation and evolution, is that we constantly talk about this buzzword of transformation. Transformation is very difficult because it rarely doesn't happen, or parts of transformation, or what is it? Evolution is where we want, is growth. Evolution is widening, it's expanding, it is finding, it is shifting, changing, but it is a movement. Evolution is a movement. Transformation is, but it's more here to there. Evolution is like an amoeba. It's all over the place. But you need to have really great leadership, right? Evolved leadership.
So evolved leadership is one thing, and let me just play back some of the things that I've heard, because I want you to talk about kind of getting to action on this and some of the tools and techniques that can help. But some of the things that resonated for me today, particularly because I'm doing this bit of research as well myself, humanity, human-centered leadership. So we talked about walking the land, and actually your link to territories. I absolutely love that. It's places, views. It's hugely diverse, interconnected. We're often too narrow in the part that we were, so we've got to expand, like that person in the Gobi that you saw. And that really, when you're looking out there, is, I think, as you described, is the freedom and the ability and where change comes from. It's that thinking vastly and acting narrowly, as you talked about. But I also love the fact, the link, not just to the human-centered side, but the community-centered side, the concept of inviting you in as the natural way of being. And that, if we translate that into organizations, I guess that's culture, belonging, diversity, tolerance, inclusion, and welcoming everybody, which in today's day and age, after the couple of weeks we've had in the world, is something that we need. And it's very interesting. With all of these things, many leaders are still struggling with these. They've had to rapidly change this year. You talked about transformation being very difficult, and it has. And the issue is being forced this year. So as your parting words around this, I'm really interested to, how do you now bridge the gap between all of these things that we've talked about, the nomadic mindset, the nomadic, the builder, the settler, really get that as well. That really resonates. what are the tools and techniques that you can help with organizations to give them maybe 2 or 3 key actions to get started on this journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, get the book.
Get the book.
That'll give you some wisdom, I suppose, in some way, and it'll show. But there's a variety of things. Okay, so the creation of an assessment has been developed, and it's called the Nomadic Mindset Journey Assessment. And that really looks at the phase at which an individual is in their development towards a nomadic mindset. And so the 3 phases that we look at in that are departure, discovery, and destination. And most of the people to date in this are in the discovery phase, which would be understandable because most of the people that are taking it are working in organizations, and they are entrepreneurs, and so they're able to be, but they haven't moved completely or fully to letting go, moving on to a nomadic mindset. So this helps them to identify it where, and then once where, then we can use coaching, we can use also other leadership packages of developing the warrior within each other. And then there's this other one which is developing the chief, the elder, so the elder wisdom. So it is going through the book in many ways and taking them on a journey. So my belief is that if organizations looked at their organization instead of a structure, like a form with boxes, as they looked at it as a territory, and they took everybody that's in there on a journey, because that's what you're going through when you go into an organization. You're going on a journey, but most people are all up in their head, and most of the time that doesn't work. You need to get down into the heart, and you need to get into the gut. So the next thing is understanding what are the awareness of the 3 different mindsets. And so that comes into a training, but it's also in talks, keynotes as well. But I also have a model that I use and taking people through in coaching, but at the same time as it can be used in development of projects, the way you develop your speeches, the way you develop your sales tools, whichever. And that is the 5 Ds. And that's a model that you can create with. And the 5 Ds stand for destination, departure, discovery, direction. Sorry, I can't even remember myself. It's direction, departure, discovery, destination, and distillation. So it's moving forward. It's always moving. And then at the very end, you look back. And you look back and where have we come from? And what do we need to get rid of? What can we change? What can we hold on to? And this is also very nomadic. And the important thing here is that organizations need to understand that their organization is all about movement. It is a moving force. And it seems very static because people aren't moving, but it is moving at a very minuscule pace or whichever. So for them to move, they need to understand that through these workshops, through these speeches, through the coaching, it can embody, it can take in and develop the nomadic mindset much greater. But at the same time, it develops the builder and the settler, because everybody has all 3 inside of them. We just have a dominance for one more than another. And that is important that we need to know. HR needs to know that. Leaders need to know that. You need to know that because you need to know who you're communicating to. It's a different communication.
It is a different communication. And I imagine that many will want to communicate you after watching or listening to this. So what's the best way for them to get a hold of you, Kevin?
Well, they can contact me through my website, which is www.thenomadicmindset. They can directly contact me at connect@thenomadicmindset.com. And, I'm happy to have all sorts of conversations. And to me, this is a movement. And it's a movement of the nomadic mindset. And if we are going to succeed in a holistic way, which incorporates climate, it includes every aspect, health, everything in this world. It has to be interconnected. It needs to be in a sustainable way, which is tough. But we need to all do our part. And if we don't do our part, well, I'll leave it. Where are we going? We have to do our part. And so, yeah.
What a great place to end that. I think you've given us a fresh new eye on leadership, one which has been there all along, but many organizations or many have not really brought that into, if you like, the business sphere. It's a journey. It helps us inform the past, but also take us forward, an ever moving journey forward into the future, into our uncertain futures that many organizations are seeing today. So, Kevin, I'd like to thank you very, very much for joining us. It's a really fascinating approach that you've developed here. And just to remind everybody, this is the book, The Nomadic Mindset, Never Settle Too Long. And we've definitely talked about that. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's always brilliant to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining our Guest Practices videocast. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel through the link below, or check out our website to access more in our current series of expert interviews.